Hello and welcome to Journalist Hangout UK, the show where we discuss issues both African and worldwide which are affecting the continent. And we look at how those issues are seen at home and in the African diaspora. I'm Priscilla Winkbo and I'm pleased to welcome our panel. Juliana Olayinka, journalist and broadcaster. Ayo Johnson, journalist and specialist in African affairs. Lanre Akinola, editor of Africa Business. And joining us by telephone, Tommy Tokwe Olodu, prevention terrorism strategist and security specialist. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show today. Tommy Tokwe, I'm going to come to you first. And I have to ask this question, which I think is so paramount given all that we have seen in Nigeria recently. Have we reached the point of no return where security is concerned? We have seen Benue, Zamfara, Plateau recently, and the continued killings, whether they're Fulani herdsmen or just herdsmen. Where are we at, security-wise? Please help us.
I think we've got to a point where we really need to sit down and declare an emergency with regard to security, because over 2/3 of Nigeria is engulfed in violent extremism, from violent kidnapping to terrorism, to community clash, to community cleansing. There is no name in the book that you want to mention in terms of violence that doesn't currently exist in Nigeria, which is costing the country over 15 billion in cost in terms of loss of property and life. So, of course, we have got to a tipping point, and we have a security infrastructure that is not fit for purpose. And a president, I must say, that is not actually charge of things properly or doing what he needs to do. When you benchmark him against other leaders around the world that have similar challenges.
Okay. Juliana, I'm going to come to you. As a result of what has happened in Plateau State recently, we now see that the National Assembly appears to have split, especially the APC. Their concern is, recently they had given some grounds to Mr. President, one of them being security issue. What are your thoughts on now the reformed APC versus the APC?
Gosh, I almost feel like it's too early to comment, but of course that's what we're here to do. I think, there's always infighting in a political party. I think there are those that are not happy with Buhari, not just in Nigeria, us in the diaspora are also unhappy. I don't want to distract against the security issues by talking about the split, because even with the split, that's not going to help the security issue. I think the fact that the government or the assembly have called what happened in Plateau a genocide shows that they need help, because of course genocide and famine are two words no country wants to ever utter. And the fact that they did, they know that it's reached a crisis point and there's something to do, something that needs to be done. But I'm not sure that, focusing on the split within the party is going to help the security matters. In fact, that could even be a boycott to try and shift things away from what's going on in the Middle Belt region to talk about politics. And this isn't politics, this is about humanitarianism.
I mean, Juliana says it's not about politics. The shift is just about politics. Do you see this as politics, or is it a determined ground to make sure that they go forward where they believe the executive are failing?
Well, the Nigerian politics is very confusing and very complex, and you cannot really resolve it in a heartbeat. And that is the problem that Buhari has faced since he came into power. Fighting against the executive, fighting against the General Assembly and National Assembly, that is. And he's never had his own way. Things have always gone against him. And of course he's compounded by, fighting in the north with Boko Haram, and now he's having herdsmen at loggerheads with farmers. Things cannot really go wrong for this president, and he himself has had failing health issues. So combined with all of this, these are huge pressures for anybody, and compounding with a man like that who's facing one of Africa's most populous nations. You find in other countries the populations are, you have a larger percentage of livestock in terms of farming land and grazing land,
Right.
as opposed to the population. And somehow the complexities and the mix in Nigeria is not perfect.
Okay. Lanre, when Buhari came in, he was touted as the security champion. We have seen, as we've already said, and I know you were agreeing, you were nodding quite a lot when Juliana was speaking. What do you think has gone wrong for him as the security champion and the service chiefs that he has in place and his inability to control them or have any impact on them?
Well, I wish I had the answer to that. I suspect he's asking himself the same question. What's gone wrong? You're quite right. This was supposed to be his strength, right? The causes we can debate. The outcome has to be that his government has to be held accountable for this. He has to answer as to why his administration has proven so incapable of providing even the most basic security in huge swathes of Nigeria now. Yes, the problem is bigger than Buhari. He inherited some of these dynamics, but this was supposed to be a strength. He hasn't delivered, and everything that happens in Nigeria at the moment has to be viewed in the context of next February's election. I have no doubt that the APC split is politically motivated.
Do you think so?
I fear that the competition for, the big office to move into the villa is definitely going to redirect resources, attention, and focus.
Okay. Temitope, let me come back to you. Do you see this split as a smokescreen? Or is it going to be a real catalyst to make sure that lives are protected, that the security chiefs are, working? Because one of the demands is that he must rearrange them, sack them, and bring in those who are capable of doing the work.
I think that this terms of political conflict that is happening is actually good for Nigeria, because for the first time we're seeing a more proactive Buhari, who within 24 hours or more or less 24 hours of an incident traveled there. Buhari does not move for anybody in the past, but he is now listening. And I think this conflict, as bad as we might look at it, is quite good for a healthy competition, political landscape. There is no doubt Buhari will win the second election, the next election, because he's got the numbers. Even at every time that he's gone to the election poll, he's always had a solid 12 million. And what will happen is just a further split. But Buhari will win, and I think there will be a reconciliation among them. But I think we need to go back also to the issue of why he's not been able to resolve the security challenges. You cannot apply an analog methodology to a modern, flexible, fluid security challenge. You can't just be static and use dogmatic approaches on this issue. Buhari was a general where there was no Facebook, when there was no Twitter, when there was no drones. He needs to have advisors around him that understand the new evolving threat that is facing Nigeria and look at best practice around the world and implement it. That is where they are lacking in Nigeria.
Okay. So, Juliana, very quickly, Temitope made mention there that for the first time, Buhari is moving. He actually went to the scenes of the problem. But, one of the accusations that's leveled at him at the moment is that his failure to act in the north is somewhat, made people to think that his feelings or his thoughts on the issue, he's quite ambiguous, with the way he's handling this particular situation. Can you really see him being able to resolve or have a grip on this, or is it just going to continue?
I'm not sure, and I think, of course, he's the leader, but I don't think it should specifically fall on Buhari. I think it's the government and the leaders in the north. People said they were bringing him in because he could appease Boko Haram. And of course, some people held his success in getting back some of the Chibok girls. So there is, and I know some are still in captivity. And of course, we have one Christian Dapchi girl still being held. But he was applauded for that. So, perhaps there could be a political strategy to say, I understand these people. I understand what's going on with the Fulanis. Let me, try to appease them. I just don't know, actually, Priscilla.
But, you know, I hear what you're saying, Lanre. He hasn't done that. And many people have said this should be the easiest thing for him to do because they are his people, as it were. So he should be able to speak to them, address them, and you know, the issue.
I think part of the problem is that everyone at all times looks to
I hate to hurry you.
President Buhari for the answer.
Yeah.
Nigeria is a country of almost 200 million people. It's a huge country. What we're talking around here is the lack of institutional strength and institutional depth that is beyond the office of the president.
Can I ask you to pause? When we come back in part two, I'll take
I do
you
want
from
to pick that
there.
up.
We will. We're going to take a quick break now. We have plenty more to discuss. So please join us in a few moments when Lanre gets back to me. Hello and welcome back to Journalist Hangout UK. I'm Priscilla Winkwa and I'm pleased to welcome back our panel, Juliana Olayinka, Ayo Johnson, and Lanre Akinola. And still with us by telephone, Temitope Olodo. Welcome back, everybody. Lanre, just before we went on the break there, I interrupted you. Please continue.
Yeah, I was just making the point that everything in Nigeria at the moment leads back to Buhari. There's a problem. What's the answer? Buhari needs to do something. Buhari needs to do something. This is reflective of a bigger issue Nigeria has, which is lack of sort of weak institutions or absent institutions. The president is one man. No matter how good he is, no matter how determined, he cannot be everywhere at the same time. So yes, of course, he as the leader has to act. He has to be seen to be acting. But on many levels, the problems Nigeria has today are a product of that lack of institutional strength.
Right.
And that's a much more broad-based challenge, and we can't lose sight of that, because if there is to be a long-term response here, that has to be at the core of it. If you don't have institutional development, you're never going to fix these things.
Okay, Ayo, I'm going to come to you. Lack of institutional development is why we're seeing this. When we look at the security chiefs, because obviously they are the main point of call when it comes to the security of Nigeria, they are failing to operate at the moment because there are some suggestions, and some of the suggestions could be said to be fact, when the president himself says, I sent him to Benue State. I didn't know he didn't stay there. This was regards to the police chief. He didn't stay there, he had left. So how then will this institution that Lanre speaks of operate if they can do what they like and Mr. President is not doing anything about it, and the National Assembly feels as though they don't have the power, even though they've spoken about it severally, to do anything, to be effective? How then do we develop this institution?
Well, we know that the National Assembly does have power because they changed the budget which the president provided the other day quite valiantly, and everybody saw that, and very wrongly as well.
But Mr. President assigned to it.
Yes, he assigned to it.
He assented to it by signing that he shouldn't have. He should have stood strong, should he have not? Yeah,
but what Buhari can't do is micromanage. And no one expects him to. When he gives his instructions, he's expected that people will take the responsibility to follow those through. And when they don't, you can't expect us to blame the president. Institutions were always there. The weakness of them would always be there. And you can't expect that Buhari would resolve those within one political cycle. And of course, he's got to look at the bigger picture in terms of the concerns that Nigeria have with the grazing issue, with the farming issue, with Boko Haram and any other insurgency that's creating instability. And with that, pull everybody along. And he's always had difficulty with that because at the heart of this is religion. Because whether we like it or not, we've got to come back to the basics, which is he's a Muslim guy, Buhari, and there's an sorry?
How does that stop?
Well, no, there was always an expectation that after Goodluck Jonathan being a Christian, that him coming in, he could resolve Boko Haram because he might be able to understand what they expect and they might trust him. And of course, being a Fulani, people would have expected that he would understand the grazing issue because it's his people. So that's
all right. I'm going to bring Temitope in here. Temi, Ayo is mentioning there that religion has a play in this, somehow preventing Mr. President from being able to say to his security chiefs, well, you failed. I need to get somebody else who can handle this matter. You're the expert. Does it have any play?
Yes, religion has a play, and it has a play because it's made it have a play. When Obasanjo was there, nobody was talking about religion because he went in there, they knew he was a former general, and it takes no nonsense from nobody. He can remove you at any point if he believes his interest is being compromised. That's why he's a politician. But this president has gone along to endorse these generals, even though they were not meant to spend more than specific time. And that shows that he's more concerned about loyalty to him. There are some quarters that have argued that it might be because of the previous coup that actually asked him out of power. It might be that he's suffering from that psychological challenge that maybe
30 years
might
later.
be another coup. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that might be the reason, but there are a lot of theories out there that he might be afraid that there might be a mini coup or something along the line.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Tommy. Juliana, you were shaking your head. Surely his apparent silence, his apparent, some would say he's selective when to activate his strong man, action man reaction to issues in Nigeria. Surely that, and perhaps the religious connotations, would that not lead to more problems?
Of course it's going to lead to more problems. With what's going on in the Middle Belt with the farmers and the herdsmen, I think we have to be very careful to label it a religious battle. I think, of course, when you're talking about Boko Haram, we've seen what they've got to say about Christians.
It's fair to say that Christians and Muslims are killed.
Thank you, and especially with specifically with the herdsman thing. I get it. I understand there is religious tension in Nigeria, but with this particular thing, because it's so complex, and we know you mentioned it earlier, Io. You know, with the land space, with population growth, of course, with a lot of the Fulani herdsmen, they weren't able to, act upon the Land Reform Act, where they ask people to say, this is my land and sign this. So it's culture. And the problem with culture, when it's so ingrained in an issue that's bad, it's the same with, it's the same with child marriages. It doesn't mean that the government and the legislation in the House of Assembly don't want to take it out. But it's so ingrained in a culture that it's difficult. And that's the issue with the herdsmen. Okay. It's not religious.
I'm going to pick up on that.
That's just my opinion, if I'm allowed one. If I'm allowed one, that's fine.
Okay, very quickly, Aya, before you do that, Juliana is saying it's culture and it's the land situation. And we saw that Femi Adesina, the president's press spokesman, said that give up your land, effectively, quite literally what he was saying is, it's either you surrender your land or you die.
Yeah. And I don't agree with that, by the way.
And most Nigerians felt that, this is almost as though the presidency is giving a nod to the land grabbing situation. Can we say that land grabbing is
in favor of who? The farmers?
In favor of the farmers. In favor of the herdsmen.
And that's exactly my point. Do you know that the vast majority of herdsmen are Muslims? In fact, all of them are Muslims. And the farmers were traditionally were Christians.
A lot of their victims are.
So we will go, it takes us back to the religious issue that at the heart of this is a Christian versus Muslim divide, which is one we don't like to refer to. But the truth is, we've got Christian farmers as opposed to Muslim herdsmen. And the president himself is a Muslim, and you could tell by he's having difficulty grasping with the realities of how to deal with the communities.
The difficulty is the ingrained culture. The difficulty isn't the fact that they're
What about
Muslims.
The human factor?
I get that's it as well. It's a human factor and it's a culture factor. This is not religion.
But what this tells us,
and it's dangerous when we label it religious because then we divide ourselves. I'm a Christian and I don't think it's religious.
What this tells us pretty quickly, what this tells us is that if we've had a Christian leader previously and they could not resolve this thing, and we were hoping that we'll get a Muslim leader to resolve it and he can't,
but he wasn't
Nigeria is in real trouble.
And we didn't bring him in because he was
a strong man that could do it.
And also he was a Muslim and he could resolve some of it.
We can't ignore what some Nigerians are now saying, and what is coming out of a lot of quarters now is that he is giving a nod. When we say it's not a religious war, Lanre, I'm coming to you. When we say it's not a religious war, but then we see him more active. If there's a problem in the Christian South, he's very strong on that. He's active. But when there's a problem, as we see with the herdsman situation, he says, I'm just going to pray and hope.
He went to
But
visit
lives
them,
are
Priscilla.
but lives are lost,
I
Juliana.
know.
It's not a visit that resolves, that stops people from killing others.
It doesn't.
It is, if you send the action men like you did down south when they didn't kill anybody, perhaps. Lanre, I mean, I don't know. Does that not suggest, unfortunately, it's giving credence, isn't it, to the whole religious war conversation?
Well,
rather.
look, religion is always going to be exploited for political reasons. That is not a Nigerian invention. That has been the case for as long as there's been human interaction. So I'm not at all surprised that people are exploiting that angle. But I have to say, this whole discussion is making me a bit sad because for me, it's a reminder of the lack of a real vision for Nigeria that's out there. Here we are squabbling over where did the president go? Why is he not doing this? Why is he not doing that? Nigeria is facing almost existential threats. You know, when you look at the economic trends, the
Very
demographic
quickly,
trends,
time doesn't allow me.
it's what we need. We need a better national conversation on
Okay.
this and some sort of vision for Nigeria.
Time doesn't permit us to go further, but Temi, let me come to you. Your final words. Outside of religion, politics and everything else, what should Nigeria be doing with regards to the security situation in order for people to feel safe and protected?
I think we need to move away from the rhetoric. I think the president needs to now be more active in engaging with the right people and injecting more people that could add value. I think the individuals that have lost things should be reassured and should be supported. Support families.
Right.
Them realize that will happen again at the beginning.
Okay. Thank you so much, Temi, for joining us there. Don't forget to follow us at RealJHUK on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. I'm Priscilla Winkle, and from the entire team here in London, it's goodbye. And thank you for watching JHUK.